There's something deeply haunting about a man who laughs while the world is collapsing. And yet, behind that laughter hides one of the most brilliant and dangerous minds of antiquity, Democritus of Abdera. In ancient Greece, where gods ruled emotions and philosophers worshipped reason, Democritus stood alone, a man who looked at the chaos of humanity and simply laughed. But it wasn't mockery, it was understanding. Because when he looked at mankind, at its fears, illusions, and self-importance, he saw nothing serious enough to deserve a tear. Born around 460 BCE in Abdera, Democritus refused to follow the intellectual fashions of his age. He didn't build temples of thought, didn't gather disciples, and never sought fame. He was a wanderer, radical, solitary, impossible to categorize. Even Plato avoided naming him, not out of disdain, but fear, because Democritus's ideas could destroy every sacred illusion. To him, the universe wasn't the creation of a god, nor a stage designed for some higher purpose. It was pure matter, eternal, invisible, indivisible, the atom. Without tools, without laboratories, he saw what science would one day confirm, that everything, from dust to stars, from thought to love, is made of countless tiny particles moving through the void. Nothing happens by divine will. Everything happens by necessity. If life ends, it's because atoms separate. If love begins, it's because atoms meet. Even war is nothing but collisions and reactions. No fate, no guilt, no forgiveness. That is why he laughed, because he saw that pain is real but meaningless, that death is certain but neutral, and that every human tragedy is just movement, atoms rearranging themselves. He once said, "I would rather discover one true cause than be king of Persia." Knowledge for him wasn't power. It was liberation from illusion. Religion, he believed, was born from fear. The gods may exist, but they live far away and care nothing for us. To pray is to waste breath. To fear is to misunderstand the universe. For this, later thinkers tried to erase him. Even Dante, centuries later, placed him in limbo, among those who explained the world without gods. And yet, Democritus went further. He built an ethics in a godless world. If the universe is blind, how should we live? His answer was simple: through euthymia, peace of mind. True happiness isn't found in wealth or fame, but in balance, the calm of someone who has understood the absurdity of existence and still chooses not to be crushed by it. The wise man laughs, not because he is ignorant, but because he has seen everything. He no longer expects meaning, justice, or salvation. He simply lives, lucid, free, and unafraid. Near the end of his life, sick and old, he asked his sister to place him in a tub filled with honey. It wasn't superstition. It was an experiment. He believed that the soul, made of warm light atoms, might linger longer if their escape was slowed. And so, submerged in honey, he waited calmly for his atoms to drift away. No prayers, no illusions, no fear. They say he died laughing. Perhaps it's only a legend, but if true, it was the most fitting farewell imaginable. A man who spent a lifetime laughing at the absurd could only leave the world in the same way, with a final smile at nothingness. Because Democritus's laughter wasn't madness, it was clarity, the laughter of someone who saw the abyss and still stood tall. Someone who knew that in a world without certainties, laughter is the last act of freedom. He didn't build schools or temples, but his thoughts survived, because truth once seen can't be buried. And maybe that's the lesson he left behind, to laugh not out of denial, but out of understanding, because only those who face the void without fear can truly call themselves free. There are men who dream of changing the world, and then there are men who refuse to play its game. Diogenes of Sinope was one of them, a man who walked through the streets of Athens in daylight, holding a lamp, saying, "I am looking for an honest man." He never found one, but in that search he exposed the sickness of human pride. Born around 412 BCE, Diogenes watched society build walls of illusion, titles, wealth, honor, etiquette, and he decided to burn them all down. He wasn't interested in theories. He was interested in truth, naked, raw, without decoration. So he stripped away everything unnecessary. He abandoned his possessions, renounced his home, and chose to live in a broken barrel on the streets of Athens. When people called him mad, he laughed. "Yes," he said, "Diogenes has gone mad, but only because the world is insane." Diogenes believed that the root of human misery was dependence, our endless craving for approval, comfort, and luxury. The more we desire, the more we suffer. The more we imitate others, the less we live. To him, freedom wasn't political, it was personal. It was the courage to need nothing. He ate with his hands, slept wherever he could, and begged for food, not out of weakness, but to prove that a man can be happy with almost nothing. When Alexander the Great came to meet him, the most powerful man in the world before the poorest man alive, he asked, "Is there anything I can do for you?" Diogenes simply replied, "Yes, step aside. You're blocking the sun." Alexander was stunned. He later said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." That single moment said everything. Power was an illusion. Freedom was real. But Diogenes wasn't just rejecting comfort. He was attacking hypocrisy. He saw men preaching virtue while chasing gold, speaking of wisdom while craving praise, pretending to be moral while living like slaves to desire. He called himself a dog, not as an insult, but as a badge of honesty. Dogs don't pretend. They eat when they're hungry, bark when they're angry, sleep when they're tired. Simple, real. Humans, on the other hand, hide behind masks of politeness, worship wealth, and call their chains success. So Diogenes barked at them, literally. He bit at the illusion of society with words sharper than knives. He was arrested, mocked, even beaten, but he couldn't be humiliated because he had nothing to lose. No possessions, no reputation, no fear. He once said, "Other dogs bite their enemies. I bite my friends to save them." That was his philosophy, brutal honesty as compassion. To him, a true philosopher was not someone who read books, but someone who lived truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was. He was a mirror to mankind, and humanity hated what it saw. One day a man spat in his face. Diogenes calmly replied, "It's okay, I wasn't worth cleaner water." He didn't react with anger, because he had conquered the ego that fuels anger. He had transcended insult, wealth, and even morality. His life was an act of rebellion, not through violence, but through authenticity. When he was asked where he came from, he said, "I am a citizen of the world." At a time when identity meant city, tribe, or nation, Diogenes declared himself free from all labels. He belonged nowhere, and therefore
everywhere. His teachings became the foundation of cynicism, a philosophy that would later inspire Stoicism and even the modern idea of minimalist living. He died as he lived, alone, free, and laughing. Some say he died of holding his breath. Others say it was from eating raw octopus. But none of that matters, because Diogenes had already done the impossible. He lived without fear in a world built on fear. He left behind no books, no monuments, no wealth, only an example of what it means to live without lies. And maybe that's why he still matters, because in a world drowning in appearances, Diogenes reminds us that truth needs no decoration, that the freest man is the one who has nothing left to lose. He laughed at civilization, not out of hate, but because he had seen through it. And when you see through the illusion of what we call progress, all that's left to do is laugh.
Intro: The Laughing Philosopher. There's something deeply unsettling about someone who laughs while claiming the world is sinking. And yet behind that smile hides one of the most revolutionary and most ignored minds of antiquity, Democritus of Abdera. In a Greece ruled by gods, myths, and philosophers chasing absolute truths, there was one man who dared to laugh. He laughed not out of joy, but out of lucidity. He laughed because he understood the absurd theater of existence, its illusions, its pretensions, its tragedies dressed as meaning. Democritus was not mocking humanity out of cruelty. He was exposing it. When he looked at mankind, he found nothing serious enough to deserve a tear, so he chose laughter instead. Part 1. The Outcast of Abdera. Born around 460 BC in Abdera, a small Greek city on the Thracian coast, Democritus never fit in. He was a wanderer of thought, a man driven not by fame or wealth, but by a relentless curiosity that could not rest. While others sought disciples, he sought solitude. While others built schools, he built ideas. He refused to join any philosophical sect. He didn't worship gods, didn't seek divine approval, didn't need an audience. Plato, perhaps out of envy or fear, allegedly refused to mention his name. Aristotle wrote of him cautiously, as if touching a dangerous flame, because what Democritus had discovered was not just a theory, it was a philosophical bomb that shattered the very foundation of belief. To Democritus, there was no divine craftsman shaping the universe, no eternal soul guiding destiny, no moral order written in the stars. There was only matter, microscopic, eternal, indivisible atoms swirling through the infinite void. How could a man 2,500 years ago, without microscopes, without science as we know it, see so far into reality? His reasoning was brutally simple. If you keep dividing something again and again, you must reach a smallest possible unit, something that cannot be divided further. He called it atomon, meaning indivisible. It was his teacher, Leucippus, who first named it, but it was Democritus who gave it a soul. To him, everything in the universe, stars, stones, thoughts, love, was nothing more than atoms moving in the void. Everything that exists does so out of necessity, not out of divine will. If something dies, its atoms scatter. If something is born, it's because other atoms collided. Even war, hatred, and desire are just movements of matter. That's why Democritus laughed,
Because when you truly see reality without illusion, when you realize that everything is merely atoms in motion, how can you take human vanity seriously? Kings fighting for power? Priests preaching divine judgment? Lovers swearing eternal devotion? All of it mere arrangements of atoms pretending to have meaning. Democritus stripped away every sacred layer until nothing remained but necessity. He once wrote, "Everything happens by necessity. Nothing comes into being by chance. Pain exists, yes, but it has no purpose. Death is certain, but it carries no cosmic lesson. Tragedy happens, but not because of sin, only because atoms move as they must." And that's why he laughed, not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough to see clearly. Part 4. Science before science. Centuries before Galileo or Newton, Democritus imagined a universe governed not by gods, but by laws, precise, mechanical, inevitable. He saw the cosmos as an infinite dance of particles, each obeying physical necessity. He predicted the existence of the void, long before modern physics rediscovered it. He believed that light, thought, and even the soul were made of extremely fine atoms. To him, the soul wasn't eternal, but it was real, a collection of warm, mobile atoms that allowed us to think, feel, and act. When those atoms dispersed, the soul died. No heaven, no hell, just dissolution. Part 5. The Ethics of the Laugh. But Democritus wasn't a nihilist. He didn't use this knowledge to despair. He used it to liberate. He believed that happiness wasn't found in wealth, honor, or power, but in euthymia, peace of mind. Euthymia was the state of a balanced soul, a soul that accepts reality without illusion, not passive resignation, but active clarity. A wise man, said Democritus, laughs because he understands. He doesn't seek control over the world, he seeks control over himself. He's not shaken by misfortune because he knows that pain, like pleasure, is just atoms in agitation. He doesn't chase immortality because he knows that everything is temporary, and that's precisely what makes it beautiful. Part 6. Religion as Fear. Democritus saw religion as humanity's grandest illusion. The gods, he said, may exist, but they don't care. They live in distant worlds, beyond our reach, indifferent to our prayers and sacrifices. Humans invented religion out of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of emptiness. And for this, Dante placed him among the great non-Christian sages in the Inferno, exiled to limbo for his disbelief. For theology, a world without God was hell, but for Democritus, it was freedom. Part 8. The Man Who Tested Death. Near the end of his life, an extraordinary story emerged. Old, sick, and dying, Democritus asked his sister to place him in a tub filled with honey. It wasn't superstition, it was an experiment. He believed that since the soul was made of fine, warm atoms, the thick honey might slow their escape from the body, keeping him alive a little longer. He wanted to observe death itself, not fear it. No rituals, no priests, no prayers, just a philosopher submerged in honey, calmly watching the boundary between being and non-being. He faced death as he had faced life, with curiosity, not terror. And then comes the story that defined his legend. It said that Democritus died laughing, so hard, so uncontrollably, that he couldn't breathe anymore. Was it true? We can't know. But if it was, then it was the most coherent death imaginable. A man who spent a lifetime laughing at the absurdity of existence could only exit through laughter itself. Because those who laugh, not out of ignorance, but out of understanding, have seen through the illusion. They've glimpsed the truth behind the mask and found it both terrifying and hilarious. Part 9. The Legacy of Lucid Laughter. Modern science, from Galileo to Newton to Einstein, has vindicated Democritus in ways he could never have imagined. The atomic theory he imagined as a thought experiment is now the foundation of physics, chemistry, and biology. And yet there's something tragic about this vindication, because while science adopted his method, it lost his laughter. Democritus didn't study nature to dominate it, but to understand it. He didn't want progress, he wanted truth. He didn't want comfort, he wanted clarity. He understood that meaning isn't found in the world, but created in the act of facing its absurdity without running away. And maybe that's the greatest lesson Democritus left us, that laughter, real laughter, isn't denial, it's rebellion. It's the strength to look into the abyss and not be consumed. In a world obsessed with hope and salvation, Democritus reminds us that maybe the most honest response to existence is not prayer or despair, but a laugh that echoes through eternity. Because once you've understood the full absurdity of human life, the pretensions, the fears, the endless chase for meaning, what else can you do but laugh? Democritus didn't need disciples, temples, or fame. His philosophy survived because it touched something raw